Hey guys, Max here, and this is your daily market update for yesterday, Tuesday, the 21st of December. Markets were, of course, open, news is flowing, and we're going to look at the indexes and how they performed yesterday, of course, and then touch on a couple news stories from China, look at Elon Musk, and then something strange from Madagascar. So let's get straight into it. So American stocks rose on the day. They had a pretty strong performance, to be honest. S&P 500 and Dow Jones were up over 1%. The Nasdaq was up over 2%, which is very solid, but futures still fell for some reason. Now, despite the fact this was a good day, it hasn't been enough to actually erase the losses that we've seen over the last week from that all-time high, but they are almost there, and really not much has actually changed in the market. The dollar held firm, as did oil prices, treasuries, and gold prices. This is really just loads and loads of volatility again. There are fears around the Omicron variant still, fears around the Fed's change in stance with tapering being accelerated and interest rate rises being planned. And now with Build Back Better failing to get passed before Christmas as well. Markets just don't know how to price all of this news, hence the big rises and the big falls based on really not much real news. Now, we can actually expect volatility to just continue for weeks, if not months, to be honest. Biden has said that he thinks he will pass Build Back Better with a few changes. So the market sentiment regarding that has shifted and they're now pricing in that he will get it passed. Really, that's not news. He can say whatever he wants. It doesn't mean anything's going to happen. Maybe it indicates that he's going to make more changes to get Joe Manchin to agree. But really, this shouldn't be enough news to change indexes by 2% in either direction. But there's just so much liquidity and so much capital flowing around in the markets. No one knows where to put their money. There is no alternative investment comes to mind, really. It's crazy. There's also less volume at the moment as it's getting close to the holiday season, so fewer people are trading. So volatility really is here to stay. Now, in my mind, the focus on the economy should really be not around Build Back Better, and it shouldn't be around the Omicron variant either. It should be on the Fed and other central banks' policies. It should be on tapering and interest rates rises. Now, there are a few interesting things that are going to come out this week, so we have them to wait for. Tomorrow, we hear from the Bank of Japan's governor, and we get to see what he thinks is happening. Obviously, a very dovish central bank. They've had some crazy quantitative easing over the years, and they've failed to really improve their economy at all over the last 3 decades. And then we're getting a lot of new information regarding the US economy, which is great as well. It's going to be really interesting to see. We're getting consumer income reports, new home sales reports, and jobless claims, for example. So some stuff to look forward to there. It should give us a great indicator as to how the holiday season is performing, especially in regards to previous years when we weren't hit by pandemics. Now, Elon Musk is back in the news because he sold another $500 million of Tesla shares, and that means he sold about 75% or 3/4 of what he initially planned to sell when he said he would get rid of 10% of his holdings. And that means he's hit $14 billion in Tesla shares sold so far. Now, obviously, he's only sold 3/4 of what he said he would on that Twitter poll, so he could sell more to reach that 10% mark. But I've also seen a couple people say that he's now sold enough to cover his tax liability, so it's unlikely that he will sell any more. I really don't have a horse in this race. I don't know if he's finished selling or if he's going to keep going. I haven't looked into it in enough detail to give you my opinion on this, but a YouTuber called Dave something, I can't remember his name, sorry, but he does a lot of Tesla and a lot of Elon videos. Well, he made a Twitter thread explaining why he thinks Elon is done selling Tesla, and it's to do with the fact that he thinks his tax liability is now covered. And I'll link that Twitter thread in the description down below so you can check it out if you want. But basically, if he's right, then Tesla's decline might stop. That selling pressure from Elon getting rid of his shares might decrease. And so it'll be interesting to see what happens with Tesla. The share price is sitting around $930 right now. Elon is now set to pay over $11 billion in taxes this year alone, meaning he will officially be the largest taxpayer in history. Now, to put that into perspective, $11 billion obviously doesn't sound like a lot when you think about, Elon's worth $240 billion, I think, at this moment. But that is an absolutely huge sum, especially when you put it into the perspective of other countries. For example, a big country with 50 million people and a relatively developed economy, if not the most developed economy like the US or Germany or somewhere like that, but Spain spends about $11 billion a year on its armed forces, and it's a country of 50 million people. If Elon were Spanish or if Tesla were Spanish and he were paying tax in that country, that would be enough to cover the entire military budget of that country for an entire year. $11 billion is a huge amount of money. It's just that in the grand scheme of the American government, where spending is sky high, it doesn't really make a dent. Now, speaking of Europe, energy prices are on the up again, which is awful news because they are already sky high, and we've had a pretty awful time with inflation, especially with energy prices over the last few months. This obviously means that inflation is probably not improving, it's probably actually getting worse, which is awful for the European Central Bank and Lagarde, who has been making bets that it's going to get better, not worse. Lots of governments are feeling pressured to step in to secure energy prices to protect consumers, but also to protect the companies that sell electricity. This industry is heavily regulated, and in the UK, for example, loads of firms have been going bankrupt because of these rising energy costs and the fact that they aren't allowed to raise electricity prices by as much as energy prices are rising by, so they are literally being forced to sell electricity at a loss, so they just go bankrupt. This is obviously not great news. This is an area where actually consumer and business protections make sense. It actually does make sense here for a government to step in and stop otherwise healthy companies from going bankrupt. Otherwise, you lose competitiveness in the market, and in the long run, consumers get hurt. So something needs to be done, and a lot of countries in Europe especially are starting to act with price freezes and reducing taxes or even increasing subsidies, for example. Now, in China news, there are a few developments. The first is with the company Intel. Obviously, it is a massive multi-billion-dollar tech hardware company, and it has told its suppliers not to source any products or materials from Xinjiang, Western China, where there is an awful lot of Uyghur forced labor going on. Now, this is categorically a good thing. Well done, Intel. All the credit to them for this. But the US government has obviously pushed for this move as well. They've made it so that if you do source something, a product or a material from Xinjiang, then you need to prove that it wasn't involved with Uyghur forced labor. In the end, though, this is a good thing for humanity, and it is a step forwards, even if it isn't quite enough to really make changes as a whole. Now, China is obviously unhappy about this. They've been claiming that Intel has sided with the West, and pundits on Chinese state-run news organizations are really unhappy about this. They're saying that Intel needs to be punished, that they need to be struck down, and they're really speaking a lot of violent rhetoric regarding this. From my point of view, though, Intel have actually been really quite good on this issue, especially when compared to companies like Apple, who don't seem to care about Uyghur forced labor at all. Intel will probably get in trouble with the CCP for this as well. It will probably impact their earnings, their profits, their revenues in the future, but they've done it anyway despite that, and so props to them. It's good to see them moving forward in this realm. Now, if you remember a couple of days ago, I talked about that debt-ridden chip company in China who was opposing what is basically a CCP takeover. Well, the chairman has been speaking out against that takeover again. He came out and said that he will fight to the end, and he's really quite unhappy about supposed secret shareholders that would gain influence over the company if this takeover goes through. Of course, he's almost definitely talking about CCP control and their attempt to increase their influence over the company, but they're trying to do it in secret without it being obvious. Now, this lines up pretty well with the CCP's actions over the last year. They've been forcing Communist Party members to take board seats on big companies. They've been handing out unilateral fines for things that just aren't crimes, things like that. And this is really in tune with the rest of it. They're just trying to be a little bit more subtle this time. Now, no doubt about it, this company is still in trouble, it can't pay its debts, and it needs a bailout, and this is the only bailout on the table, but the chairman clearly has some principles, and he isn't staying quiet, which is quite surprising. I have to say, I do think he's a brave man, but I can't say that I expect this to end well for him. Within a few years, he will probably just disappear. He'll probably lose his seat at the company, and we'll probably never hear from him again. But that being said, we're not 100% sure of his aims yet either. This could be about getting a better deal for the company or himself. It could be about getting more money in his pocket, but it could also be about preserving the integrity of the company. We really just have to wait and see here. Now, China's property developers jumped in value by 5% the other day alone, and no one knew why at the time, or at least in the West. But it turns out that a Chinese government outlet released a public statement saying they will go all out to protect the Chinese property market, and this was seen positively by the markets because it sounds like they're going to be given a lot of bailouts. The problem is the message was then deleted and hidden from everyone a couple of hours later, and the Chinese Communist Party is trying to delete evidence that this message was ever given, so someone higher up clearly wasn't happy with that statement. Now, this could indicate more CCP support for the struggling real estate sector, which is why stocks jumped on it. But again, we're really not 100% sure what's going on here. This could have been a rogue message sent by someone that wasn't authorized by the higher-ups. We just need to wait and see. Now, we also saw a court case over a Harvard professor who had secretly been getting paid by the Chinese state, and he's just been convicted on a bunch of fraud charges. Basically, he was secretly working for the Chinese state and helping them to recruit bright young Harvard students, and he was obviously trying to hide this all from the US government. He was being paid about 50 grand a month, and he had another $200,000 given to him for living expenses, and then another $1.5 million paid to him in research grants. We now know how much his integrity is worth. It's not all that much, to be honest. I'm glad this man will go down in history as a coward and a failure. His legacy will be shameful, and he deserves every ounce of condemnation he gets. I've said it before and I'll say it again, there's more to life than money. In random Chinese news, the CCP is releasing NFTs. Yep, they're selling non-fungible tokens online, cashing in on the bubble while it's still around, because NFTs have actually been falling in price across the board for months now, by the way. And this is hilarious if you ask me. You have to be absolutely insane to buy any of these. It is, however, interesting because we didn't know what the CCP's stance or their thoughts on NFTs were, and it was possible that they would have considered them cryptocurrency. Because regulation is still so early in this area, they aren't properly categorized at all, but this means they probably don't consider NFTs currency, which is at least quite interesting if nothing else. Finally, this isn't really finance news, but it's just something I saw that I thought was quite interesting and pretty incredible. In Madagascar, there was a government minister who was in a helicopter crash over the ocean. He somehow survived the crash along with a policeman, and they then swam for 12 hours back to shore, and they're both alive and well. This is a pretty crazy story of human perseverance, if you ask me. The guy was 57 years old as well, and I just thought that was a pretty crazy story that I'd let you guys know. I'll put a link down below in the description for anyone who wants to read more about it. Now that is it for the day, guys. We will be back tomorrow for more as usual. If you enjoyed this video, then leave a like and a comment to bless the YouTube algorithm. If you want more content like this, then check out our Patreon and join our community of investors. You get access to our Discord, loads of exclusive content like insight into my portfolio and buy and sell alerts for all my own investments. And if you join before December ends, then the next month will be entirely free. There's a link in the description to masterworks.io, a site that allows you to buy fractional shares of art from world famous artists like Banksy, which can be a great way to diversify your portfolio with non-market correlated assets. It's completely free to sign up, you don't have to buy anything, so if that sounds interesting to you at all, then make sure to check it out. There's also a link in the description to BLOCKFI, which will give you up to $250 in free Bitcoin when you use it. You can also get 9% interest on stablecoins like USDC, which is a far higher rate than you'll get from any savings account these days. Just make sure not to use Tether. Thank you all for the support. Thanks for watching. Stay stoic. Until next time.